The credit card machine flashed red 3 times before the silence in the upscale steakhouse became unbearable. Marcus Chen, tech billionaire and founder of Horizon Industries, sat frozen in the corner booth, staring at the declined payment notification as if it were written in a language he couldn't comprehend. His hands, which had signed billion-dollar deals and shaken with presidents, trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet again, knowing there was nothing else inside. The expensive suit he wore, the watch that cost more than most cars, the confident demeanor he'd carried for decades, all of it meant nothing in this moment when he couldn't pay for a simple steak dinner. But before Marcus could speak, before the humiliation could fully sink in, something unexpected happened. The waiter, a man named Daniel Rivera with kind eyes and worn shoes, quietly pulled out his own card and handed it to the manager. His voice was barely a whisper, but his words cut through the tension like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. "I've got this one. Please, just run my card." The manager looked confused, almost offended, but Daniel's expression was firm. He didn't know he was standing before one of the richest men in the country. He only saw a human being in distress, and that was enough. If you believe in the power of kindness, in second chances, and in the beauty of human compassion, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this story, and subscribe to the Kindness channel. Let's build a community that celebrates the good in people. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support means everything. Marcus wanted to stop him, to explain that this was all a terrible mistake, that his assistant had somehow frozen his accounts during a security audit he'd forgotten about. But the words caught in his throat. Something about Daniel's simple act of generosity, offered without hesitation or judgment, struck him in a place that money had never reached. As Daniel returned to the table with a gentle smile, assuring Marcus that everything was taken care of, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine human connection, untainted by his wealth or status. He thanked Daniel quietly, noting the name on his tag, and asked if they could talk for just a moment. That's when Marcus learned Daniel's story. Between refilling water glasses and checking on other tables, Daniel shared fragments of his life in that humble, unassuming way that people do when they don't realize how extraordinary they are. He was a single father of 2, working double shifts at the steakhouse to make ends meet. His wife had passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 7-year-old daughter Emma and 5-year-old son Lucas alone. The job at the steakhouse was his second job. He worked construction during the day, then rushed to put on the waiter's uniform by evening. The card he'd used to pay for Marcus's meal was supposed to cover Emma's dance recital costume, but he'd seen the panic in Marcus's eyes and couldn't walk away. To Daniel, it was simple. You help people when they need it, because that's what his late wife would have done. Marcus left the restaurant that night with Daniel's contact information and a heaviness in his chest that felt like awakening from a long sleep. For years, he'd been eating at places like this, surrounded by people who knew his name and his net worth. People who treated him like royalty not because of who he was, but because of what he could do for them. He'd built an empire, changed industries, made millions for investors. But somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing people like Daniel. He'd stopped seeing the real world, the one where a man sacrifices his daughter's happiness to help a stranger, where kindness isn't a transaction but a reflex. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He cleared his entire schedule. He called his assistant, had his accounts unfrozen with a single phone call, and then sat in his penthouse office overlooking the city, thinking about Daniel's worn shoes and gentle smile. He thought about Emma's dance recital costume and Lucas's probably hand-me-down clothes. He thought about all the board meetings and acquisition deals and profit margins, and he realized that none of it had made him feel as human as that moment of humiliation in the steakhouse. Being vulnerable, being helped, being seen as just a person. It had cracked something open inside him that years of success had sealed shut. But what happened next changed everything, and it started with a knock on Daniel's apartment door 1 week later. When Daniel opened it, exhausted from another double shift, he found Marcus standing there, no longer in an expensive suit but in jeans and a simple shirt, holding an envelope and wearing an expression that was equal parts nervous and determined. Marcus didn't introduce himself as the billionaire from the news or the CEO of Horizon Industries. He simply said thank you, and then he told Daniel the truth. about who he was, about that night in the restaurant, and about how a waiter's kindness had reminded him what truly mattered in life. The envelope contained not just reimbursement for the meal, but a check large enough to change Daniel's circumstances entirely, along with something more valuable, a job offer with full benefits, college funds for Emma and Lucas, and Marcus's personal commitment to be present in their lives, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. Daniel stood there, tears streaming down his face, unable to process what was happening. He kept saying it was too much, that he didn't do it for a reward, that this wasn't necessary. But Marcus understood something Daniel didn't yet grasp. This wasn't about repaying a debt. This was about two men who needed each other, one who had forgotten how to be human, and one who had never stopped being exactly that. Marcus had spent years building an empire in isolation, eating expensive meals alone, surrounded by people but utterly lonely. Daniel had spent years giving everything he had, running himself into exhaustion, loving fiercely but drowning in responsibility. Together, they formed something neither had anymore, a genuine connection. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness ripples outward in ways we can never predict, please like this video and share it with everyone you know. The world needs more stories like this, more reminders that we're all connected, that a small act of compassion can change everything. The restaurant where it all began eventually became their meeting place, where Marcus and Daniel and the kids would gather for dinner every Sunday. Marcus taught Emma and Lucas about technology and dreams, while Daniel taught Marcus about presence and gratitude. The manager who'd witnessed that fateful night never forgot it either. He started a program at the restaurant to help staff members in financial crisis, inspired by Daniel's selfless act. And sometimes, late at night, Marcus would sit in his penthouse and think about how close he'd come to missing it all. The friendship, the purpose, the reminder that wealth without humanity is just numbers on a screen. But kindness, real kindness, is the currency that actually changes lives. Before we close, take a moment and comment below, what would you have done in Daniel's position? Have you ever helped a stranger without expecting anything in return? Because in the end, the story wasn't about a billionaire who got humiliated or a waiter who paid a bill. It was about two lonely souls who found each other in an unexpected moment, and how one simple act of paying for a stranger's meal became the beginning of something neither of them knew they desperately needed. A reminder that beneath all our circumstances and struggles, we're all just people trying to make it through, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply be kind.